Welcome to the Pinkhurst Podcast, a real and whimsical look at what it means to be fully alive with all the joy and chaos and pressure and vulnerability and beauty. Take the ride along with unexpected guests and be inspired to fall in love with your own unique destiny and meaning. In this episode, we explore the mysterious beast known as poetry, goofballism, and the gravitational pull of oblivion. What does it mean to be an artist? If you remove all of the illusory carrots, will you still rise and greet the blank page? How can you liberate yourself from the throes of doubt and fear? Gotta die to remember. Let's go see.
Obviously, I'm rambling, but that goes to the pseudonyms. And for this episode, I'm calling it 8 points in 9 seconds, you goofball, with another title, This Is Not an Exit. That was a ramble. I always tightrope that line of a gibberish madman, but I'm really too sane for my own good. This episode is sponsored by Uka Wuka. No one knows what they do exactly, but it sure is fun to say. Uka Wuka. One of us is a hitchhiker, but I don't remember who is who. We stopped at so many gas stations, pee breaks, body snacks. I, always dawdling at the invisible vending machines. You, tending to air pressure and sustenance. Henry Miller said something about an air-conditioned nightmare. Reggie Miller scored 8 points in 9 seconds. You told me turn right, and I veered into oncoming traffic. One of us is roadkill, and the other doesn't exist. I keep forgetting who is who. Imperfecta, ketchup, blood, and canned applause. Walking suits me fine these days. Welcome to the Pinkhurst Podcast. Our guests today, plural, are Nadia Szold and Geoffrey Young. Nadia is a film director, producer, writer, teacher, mother, and distinctly herself. Geoffrey Young is a poet and publisher, visual artist, curator, gallery owner, art dealer, ping-ponger, goofball, dad, and ... How you guys doing?
We're good.
We're identified.
I try not to identify.
And I actually think I might go by Szold from now on instead of Szold. But I like this.
I never knew that.
Syllable.
It gives a sizzle.
Snoop Dogg altered her Szold.
Szold.
Yeah, a little sizzle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for being here. To begin, I wanted to set an intention, a theme that's been circulating throughout my entire life, and particularly the past few weeks, reemerging in a very prominent way. I'm sure you're both familiar with this quote by E.E. Cummings: "To be nobody but yourself in a world that is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight." I don't know if you've heard that, but seeing your film, which I would love to speak about, both of you, from knowing you, Nadia, and then knowing you via the film, Geoffrey, both of you seem to be really getting your essences out into the air in this incarnation. And that is very rare, I would say, as far as day-to-day interacting with people. We see glimmers, but rarely do I come across people in this era who are boldly, brazenly, loudly, quietly themselves. How do you do that? How did you do that? How do you continue to do that? What are your thoughts on doing that? Let's start with you, Geoffrey, as the OG, triple OG.
Yeah, well, it's funny, when you're 81 years old and you're looking back on your life, you say, well, how many times did it start? Not where, but you're in college and you're out of college, and supposing you get married and have some kids and have some jobs and begin to teach college and do this and do that and begin a publishing company and take that for 30 years and meanwhile writing the whole time and trying to stay alive that way. So there's all these kind of multiple um, tensions going on in multiple realities. And I think you got to be lucky to still be doing it, because it's one thing to be a poet at 25 years old. It's quite another thing to be cursed with a lifetime problem. And so I find the writing for me is the pleasure, but it's the editing. I mean, the first drafts are fun, just knock them out, but then go back in. And once they're in the computer and having some fun, pimping them out and doing what you did with your poem, which was to make every little syllable count perfectly and make each little moment of brain advance lively. And I think you did a great job on that poem.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that's the first poem I've ever heard of yours. So you're a major.
Yeah, I'm 38 and I've been doing it since 13, and definitely, I would say, a street baller of poetry, so to speak. I did major in creative literature at the New School, and I took a poetry class. Later, I'll speak a bit about that, perhaps, but it didn't resonate with me learning poetry traditionally. And from an interview I read, or not an interview, but an article about you, it seems like you may be a bit self-taught as well, or at least kind of flowing in your own way that doesn't adhere to rules, but has an ear, like you know the sounds. And you're probably more well-read than I am regarding poets, having published so many incredible poets in your time. I'm kind of a Rumi, Ginsberg. Hess is my favorite author. Hess, Haruki, Tom Robbins, Vonnegut, Sly and the Family Stone, rest in peace to Sly.
Yeah.
And Tom Robbins. Nadia, what's your take on being yourself? You know, I interviewed the chair of the Pacifica program 2 days ago, and we spoke a lot about Hillman and her book that I just finished reading that I told you about, The Archetypal Artist, Reimagining Creativity and the Call to Create. Hillman wrote a book with Michael Ventura, anyway, I don't know, but it's called 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World is Getting Worse. And it explores Hillman's idea of the acorn theory and how soul is really living and vivifying and recognizing, becoming itself, individuating through us. It's not us individuating, it's the soul through us. The acorn/oak tree, perhaps your poetry, I would say, Geoffrey, but all of us at the different stages of sapling, oak, however far we get to go, are kind of writing about that essence that's always been there.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about makes me think of Rudolf Steiner, who is a connection between the three of us, both you and I having gone to Rudolf Steiner School, and Jeff having sent his two children to the Rudolf Steiner School that I went to. And that's the school was really the connection between my parents and Jeff. So the incarnation of the soul and realizing, like the soul basically using using the body to realize its purpose. I think it makes sense in a way. I feel like it's really cool aging. Like I'm 40 years old and I feel like I'm just getting smarter because it takes a really long time to master anything. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell says it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. And I really feel like I'm just starting to get the hang of certain things that maybe came easy to people who are just geniuses. But it's such a pleasure to read Dickens as a 40-year-old as opposed to a 13-year-old who doesn't know their ass from their elbow. And I'm reading Dickens at night and just going into complete reverie over these passages. And I feel like my brain has never been this sharp than now, and it's just getting better, and my writing gets better. So I don't know. I think that it's with practice. It's with like just the constant. If you can make it a daily practice, that's a way to stay alive, or a way to be authentic. It's really hard when you get out of practice and like life just crowds so that you aren't actually writing or doing any kind of meditative interior expression, having time alone. So, and then when that happens, I feel like I'm like suddenly like sort of just stretched out as this like veneer of myself, as opposed to having like a really deep, sort of a deep lake with lots of kelp and other things, and maybe like a turtle swimming by. So, but when I do write, then I feel the depth again, and so it is like it's a way to stay sane, but it's also a way to like to stay connected to my soul. And then then I think of like, is it something that's not necessarily useful, but is it something that gives pleasure? Is it something that can I don't know, just not bore? But so when you're sharing it, or sometimes even when I'm writing, I am thinking about the reader, and I don't want to bore the reader, and I don't want to I want to give I want to give the pleasure that I'm having from creating a sentence that gives me aesthetic pleasure.
And I think what you just said, I don't want to bore the reader, but you also don't want to bore yourself.
Exactly.
And if you are if you're keeping the jets under your own roast, it's likely to please the reader too.
Yes.
And I think it's important, writers, to consider that audience and say, is this just indulgent drivel, or is this trying to get at something said? And I think we owe that audience, that reader, something more substantial than our own sloppy story. Although our own sloppy story counts for a lot. And that's the narrative we all kind of share. So it's how to make it palatable, likable, and, discovering something.
I believe in the beginning of your film, you say something about that, Geoffrey, about, why would anyone care about these noticings or
That's
these
right,
personal.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a way to just kind of allow ourselves to go into poetry as the subject of the film, to
Exactly.
just state it out front.
It's making me think of this chapter from the book that the chair of Pacifica Mary of that DCH program sent to me. It begins with Picasso painting one of his last, I believe, pieces when he was 91. And it talks about, they're using this as an example of their theory, of the acorn theory, of looking at life not as something, like whether it's psychotherapy looking back toward childhood to see if there's roots of issues. Instead of that, perhaps those were just mirrors. Everything is just a mirror for the soul, which already exists, doesn't anything, is always there, always will be, to see itself. And the idea of marrying your mother, I love this idea. That can obviously be a theme for a lot of us. Perhaps it's not you're marrying your mother. Perhaps your mother is actually preparing you for your wife. I thought that was kind of funny. Flip. But he's talking about this painting, and it says, this haunting, simple image turned out to be the initiatory experience for my theory of life lived backwards. Here is the invisible Picasso caught on the canvas, a self-portrait of the daimon that inhabited him all his life. At the end, it emerges and shows itself. Here, it says, this is who you are, Picasso. You are me, the ever-young painter. I am the clown, the innocent, fresh eye, the dark eye, the quick-moving, mercurius, the sentimental, bluish melancholy, the little boy. I am your ghost. Now you see who drives you, what has kept you fresh and eager, and now you can die. Like I said, the soul is kind of living through us. Everything is imagination. The image already exists, etc. I don't want to get stuck in the I don't know.
Late Picasso paintings where he kept looking at himself as a very old man. And he'd been doing paintings from the last 10 years of the Musketeers, these kind of adventurous guys wearing funny outfits out of the 17th century. So he was entertaining himself with these Musketeers who were alive and well. But at the same time, he's very old and he begins to show himself as a guy very close to death. And what he's looking at often, he's the observer of the young people still sexually involved, romantically involved. And he's thinking, I'm no longer there.
Mm.
And it's kind of deeply sad. And he's hurting because he's lost that youth that defined him. But he's documenting that difficulty, that distance between age and vitality. And he's doing it with a certain amount of late life vitality, too, because nobody had a line like him. So I'm glad you brought up late Picasso because, everybody evolves. And you're talking about that soul. Only most of the people my age, they've stopped writing. They've stopped painting. They've kind of let it deteriorate or end. And I feel like Nadia, I feel like I'm just getting going. Leave me alone.
Just warming up.
Yeah.
Well, in a lot of cultures, the idea of becoming the hollow bone, I don't know if you've heard that, but that's really what it's all about, And I think of Michelangelo with the David statue, which you may be familiar with, asked.
I love it.
Yeah, and he said David was already in the marble, and it was just about removing everything that wasn't David. That's really a big deal for me of what we said. So the 13-year-old you was still you and all of us, but it's about removing everything that isn't us and all of the things we accumulate, which is part of how we understand who we are by understanding who we're not. Really, maybe the only way we understand.
I like the sculptural analogy.
In the marble.
Because there is a stripping down because there's a kind of building up through the influences that you are inculcated with through childhood and adolescence and
education.
Yeah. And then you're kind of chiseling it away.
I mean, I saw a little rubber devil duck in a Martha's Vineyard candy store, and it grabbed me so intensely that I've told you about the Little Mother Project. I've been meditating with this symbol for a year and a half. I just tattooed it on my leg with a third eye, and it's becoming this. His name is Quack. And for me, he kind of represents the innocence of darkness, or just a take on, the Abraxas, really. One of my favorite Gnostic concepts that Hess introduced me to through Damien and books like that. But my point is, I've never studied Warhol or anything like that, but I feel like as I get older, all of the energy I would exert on projects was wonderful, but it was overly complicated. And now just seeing and reflecting the symbol of a little devil duck can say just as much as writing a novel.
Yeah.
And I'm forced to have more boundaries, and boundaries perhaps are freedom, physically, being a father, all these different things. And a quote that I also wanted to set the stage, I've looked everywhere to try to attribute it to where I found it, but can't find this person. Thought it was Campbell, but we'll see. People work their entire lives to retire and then they go fishing. But in truth, they are fishing for mermaids, and by then it's too late.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe we should start a retirement home with mermaids and mermen as the nurse attendants.
Sounds good to me.
Senior retirement mermaid facility for resurrection of genius Damon. It's not too late. One of my favorite parts of the film, there were so many, and Nadia, you were sitting behind me and reflected how I was kind of moving or weaving to the film. After the film, Molly, my wife, looked at me and said, wow, that's not that you are me, Geoffrey, and both of you for that, but the validation of that. So it's your fault if you've given me a few more years to continue indulging my naivete. I blame you. You're enablers, obviously.
Of course.
But no, it was so affirming, and just seeing back through my life, all this, starting magazines and, all these variations of my creativity and trying to fit it into a mold that never fit, in the way you've ruggedly and beautifully both, and Geoffrey, obviously it's focused on you, the galleries and the books it meant a lot. And one of my favorite lines was when you're talking about what I understand as the immortals, the laughter of the immortals, as Hess writes about. But you're saying the cost it takes to be a poet, the sacrifice, what it takes to be there. And you can hear the immortals almost beckoning from oblivion. Or perhaps you are wondering if it's time to join the immortals in oblivion. And then you say, not yet, you goofball.
Yeah.
And I just love that. And I was curious if there's anything you guys want to speak on oblivion and goofballs and sacrifice.
Yeah, the whole mortality issue is kind of what we're asking about. Since we are going to die, how are we, if at all, going to be remembered? The poet can leave a few traces of language, the painter some imagery, the filmmaker a film. You can leave your podcasts and whatever else you've come up with your poems. It's a mystery for us. It's an outrage that we have to die. It's horrifying. At the same time, hey, it may be the next adventure. And I think there are people who can face it as the inevitable fact. And so therefore, what we have now is that precious time to do exactly what we want to do to the degree we can. I think it's a privilege to be an artist and a poet, because that means somehow we've had the time to go after that. And I don't think it's a big sacrifice. I think it's a gift from maybe the outside to us, that we've been accorded the time and to pursue it. So, I don't know how Nadia feels about that, but it's a gift, I think, to be an artist in any way.
Yeah, that poem is one of my favorite little short. I don't know what it's like, shorter than a sonnet.
Well, they're my little fake 14-line sonnets.
Okay,
but,
it is.
But, I was thinking, people are always waiting for somebody else to croak, but I'm not ready, boys. Not yet, you goofballs. Don't get your hopes up. I'm still around.
Yeah, and also
just to say on that, how I took that was more, for me at least, the part of me that feels ready to die, that might pity itself, that's saying I'm ready to join oblivion, but then the immortals who are in oblivion telling me, not yet, you goofball. Like, that's how I took it, like, lighten up, motherfucker, which Jitterbug Perfume, Alabar trying to become an eternal being, the secret of the elixir, and his wife finally decides to go away. Kudra, if you've read Jitterbug Perfume, and he's just feeling the heaviness and the literalness of trying to perpetuate the physical, and then lightening up is kind of what the giggle is found in, if you go past oblivion. Sorry, Nadia, please.
No, that's a really interesting take, and it's totally different from my take on that sonnet, which was, for me, it was something where a lot of artists are really only valued in their, like, after they've died. So when someone has died and then they've left this body of work that is then reevaluated and evaluated as really worthy, that's when they achieve immortality. And the poem says, I'm almost ready to join the immortals, but not yet, you goofball. I'm not ready yet. So
that's humor, I think, isn't it? Kind of a little bit of a, anxious humor.
Well, that poem in a quick, amount of time, for me, does it all. It honors the existential dread and the suffering of the illusion, Maya, which, whether or not it is an illusion, it's still very real. When I tattoo my throat last week, the pain is excruciating. When I imagine my little son, potentially, whatever, all the fears that can emerge as our hearts connect and imprint on each other, the illusion is real. So in that poem, you go from that to the lightening up, and that, to me, is the spectrum.
Well, don't bury me because I ain't dead yet.
Exactly.
My tombstone is going to say one last thing.
Oh, is that good? Just that? One last thing?
One last thing with a finger pointing up. Because the joke is when I'm on phone calls or in creative meetings specifically, I always say, okay, last thing. And there's always a last thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite tombstone is out in East Hampton. I'm walking around looking for Frank O'Hara's tombstone, and I can't find the little stone that says, "Grace to be born and live as variously as possible." Famous line. But I go over and I see this other tombstone. It's just a name of a guy. It says 30% off.
That's good. So there's a lot I'd like to cover, but I'm also going to just trust the gravitational pull of what wants to come through. One thing I've noticed about what I think I've noticed about you, Geoffrey, and I imagine for all of us creatives to some extent, pseudonyms for the shapeshifter. I don't know if that Frank O'Hara quote with the variety, does variety imply that he's saying, may your life be lived in multiple iterations without being limited to one? Like, may you experiment with forms? Is that what that meant?
Probably. Grace to be born and live as variously as possible.
Yeah, variously.
Opens up, and he said, take the whole trip, do whatever,
So pseudonyms and the shamanistic, in my understanding, prayer, may you die many times before you drop the body. That ability to let go of who we thought we were. A lot of cultures talk about, and in this writing with Hillman in that book I mentioned, the soul wants to constantly die and be reborn. And so the atrophy or the rigor mortis that can set in our culture perhaps is what can cause a lot of discomfort, addiction. I don't know. I'm not trying to analyze that, but pseudonyms for the shapeshifter. So for me, as a young hip hop influenced guy, we came up with a lot of names and changed our names. The different presses that publish your chapbooks, I was wondering if that is you making up different names.
Everyone's got a different name.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Make them up.
So was it Worldwide Suicide, Above Ground, Giant Squid, to name a few?
Yeah, those are they. Yeah.
And so many more.
Those are they is the next one.
That would be nice, because that's so correct grammatically, but no one says it correct anymore.
Exactly.
Those are they is the correct grammar if you got that thing to say.
Not those are them. Them are those.
Oh, you can't say that. But that business, I like the idea, since I'm publishing myself and I'm giving the books away, I thought, why not have it be part of the invention of that book is the new press name. So rather than accept Random House or, Farrar, Straus and Giroux, no, a new one for every book.
That's how I've always wanted to create. It was awesome to see that.
The most recent one is published by Alien Corn. Where did I get the phrase alien corn? It comes out of a great Keats poem, Ode to a Nightingale, one of the most beautiful poems in the English language. And damned if the word alien corn isn't there. I'm grabbing alien corn, John Keats. Sorry. And he didn't give a damn. So
inside jokes in my new project, I've kind of done the opposite of what you were talking about. Maybe not the opposite, but in my understanding of it a little bit, I've so exhausted my attempt to communicate to the reader or the audience that I've fully gone into inside joke territory. And almost saying like, maybe you're not supposed to understand. Maybe I should mumble more. Maybe I'm Dumbledore. The inside jokes, the attempting to communicate or to clarify has been crippling the music. Alchemy, in the end of the life of a true alchemist, apparently, you're only allowed to choose one student to share your secrets. The immature alchemist is always trying to spout the wisdom, therefore, or the hermit. Obviously, there's all sorts of variations and styles, and I think, as Watts said, attempting to help another person is the equivalent of a monkey trying to rescue a fish from drowning. So I really love that, to always bring that back even to this moment. Like, I'm not trying to say this way or that way or any way. They're all personal, and I'm going to deviate one more time, the suppression of witch consciousness the spirit sky father at a certain point can be traced back to slowly deviating, to say that again, to pulling us away from animism, from nature gods, to that connection. In that, there's been many consequences, repercussions, of course. Partially, some of that is the over-defining, or needing to categorize capitalism potentially arising from efficiency. Education, the root word, means to coax the genius out, I believe, in Latin. But school is something to do with some god or etymologically attached to normal, like making people fit into society. Obviously, I'm rambling, but that goes to the pseudonyms. And for this episode, I'm calling it 8 points in 9 seconds, you goofball, with another title, This Is Not an Exit. That was a ramble. I always tightrope that line of a gibberish madman, but I'm really too sane for my own good.
One thing that you said that made me think of Jeff in the idea of not catering to a reader or audience and having these inside jokes, and made me think a bit about language poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can talk about language poetry, because that's that was going against the lyric, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was going against
yeah, it was up against, I mean, when the language scene broke in the mid 70s in San Francisco and in New York at the same time, the prominent literary mode was narrative and imagistic, and poems that made sense and conveyed people's experiences. And the Beats had come along with their, enthusiasms and politics and libertarian thought. And suddenly the poets out west, they said, we don't have to make sense. We don't have to communicate. We can make a music so tight and so weird that no one's ever heard it before. Clark Coolidge was an example of somebody who trusted his own ear to take him places that no poet had ever been. And that influence and that permission to try something it's both indulgent, but it's brilliant. And the best examples of the poetry are very good. I think for the most part, that language poetry failed because it didn't have that communicative gene operating. And therefore, people aren't interested if they're not being touched by the storyline, the person, so it had to be done. And I think you have to indulge from time to time, because you've used up your normative. Go off the rails. The rails will take you somewhere new. Off the rails will take
off the rails.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I asked some painter friends of mine, I said, what percentage of your time when you're drawing are you in control of your drawing? And he said about 50%. Mm-hmm. This is Steve DiBenedetto. He's trying to draw something he's never seen before, but he only has himself and his own talents to get him there. Mm. So what percentage of the time he says 50% I'm kind of lost and 50% I'm guiding the picture. Mm. And I thought that was pretty good. I think pretty high percentage of being a little bit lost. But I think in poetry, you never quite know where you're going. The poem takes you places because you are vulnerable to taking that,
So I decided to collect a few definitions of poetry by a few of my favorite writers to bring into this conversation, if that's okay with you guys.
Sure.
So I tattooed definition of a poet on my arm when I was a young man, and that was inspired, speaking of the Beats, by Kerouac at the time. Kerouac says a poet is a fellow who spends his time thinking about what it is that's wrong, and although he knows he can never quite find out what this wrong is, he goes right on thinking it out and writing it down. A poet is a blind optimist. The world is against him for many reasons, but the poet persists. He believes that he is on the right track, no matter what any of his fellow men say. In his eternal search for truth, the poet is alone. He tries to be timeless in a society built on time. I don't fully agree with all of that, but there's flashes in there. I think of the spiritual gorillas that Henry Miller and your father were describing, and how hard it might be for soulful people to exist now in the air-conditioned nightmare. So I understand that. And I flash back to your saying a little while ago how much of a privilege it is to be an artist, and Oscar Wilde saying a dreamer travels by moonlight and their curse is they see the dawn before the rest of the world. That's the pessimistic side. My dad said, why don't you rewrite that and say their blessing, their gift is they see the dawn before the rest of the world. So
Yeah.
all in the eye of the beholder. So Lewis Gluck says poetry survives because it haunts, and it haunts because it is simultaneously utterly clear and deeply mysterious, because it cannot be entirely accounted for, it cannot be exhausted. Hermann Hesse, through one of his characters, said, I've always felt a certain kinship with poets, and have gotten to know quite a few on whom my friendship was not entirely wasted. Poets, even today, more so than other people, are inclined to believe in certain stable, eternal forces and concepts of beauty which lie half asleep in the womb of life, the intimation of which sometimes shines through the enigmatic present as summer lightning shines through the night. In such moments of illumination, it seems to them that all ordinary life, and they with it, are nothing more than pictures limned on a lovely curtain, and only behind this curtain does genuine true life go on. The most supreme, the most eternal words of the great poet seem, even to me, but the babblings of a dreamer who, without knowing it, murmurs through heavy lips of the heights of the world beyond, heights he has only briefly glimpsed. That I like a lot. And then Hermann Hesse.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, he was way out there. We read him in the 60s, the Steppenwolf and a few others. And I haven't looked at him in, 50 years.
Oh, you should go back, man. I just reread all of his works recently, and then I scoured thrift books and Bart's books and found a very rare autobiography collection of his writings and weird fairy tales, and he's one of my favorites. Now, Haruki Murakami, who's also one of my favorites, in his book Kafka on the Shore, which was my first experience with him, there's a conversation between this librarian and this young man talking about a song and the lyrics. Symbolism and meaning are two separate things. I think she found the right words by bypassing procedures like meaning and logic. She captured words in a dream, like delicately catching hold of a butterfly's wings as it flutters around. Artists are those who can evade the verbose. Most great poetry is like that. If the words can't create a prophetic tunnel connecting them to the reader, then the whole thing no longer functions as a poem. But plenty of poems only pretend to do that. Right, it's a kind of trick, and as long as you know that, it isn't hard. As long as you use some symbolic sounding words, the whole thing looks like a poem of sorts.
I don't know what to say, but that's great.
Well, for me, what you described in the language poetry, and I'm not familiar with it, I think there's a line between the cerebral side of just doing weird things, which I'm not sure they were doing, and then kind of grabbing these intuitive, that ear listening, so there still is some instinct and emotion and power behind it, but it's just this refusal to use traditional meaning, more like the difference between signs and symbols. So, yeah.
Poetry is cursed by cliche, and everybody's taught to avoid them, but inevitably they sneak in because they're habitual forms of thinking, and they we're all constituted by habitual forms of thinking. So how to get outside that? And I think you've been bringing up very interesting thinkers who've tried to stay fresh, to stay ahead of the cliche.
Yeah. My grandmother, who was a bit of a poet, she just told me never ever use a cliche in your writing.
Yeah.
And whenever I do use a cliche in my writing, I take it out and I think of her. And I also think of Billy Collins, the poet, who he came to my high school and he read a poem of mine, and then he said, "As a poet, you're allowed 2 exclamation points in your lifetime."
That's hilarious. Wow.
But
Save them.
and that, I mean, it's interesting because yeah, you don't want to be using these really
Conventional language.
yeah, or amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So you have to find another way of saying it.
Yeah, it's I think it's been interesting watching how all of our email life is one kind of writing. I think I have put more exclamation points in email than in any other thing I've ever done because I'm trying to give it a little punch to what I'm saying so they might hear my enthusiasm.
Totally.
And I think with a poem on the page, it's a little different. Their email belongs to a category I don't quite understand it because it's 20 years old. But do you like email?
Honestly, I'm so burnt out from phones that I'm just over all of it. I barely have the energy to text, or I turn my phone off at 1 p.m. I've been going through a weird phase recently. I guess obviously romantically, epistolary communication sounds the best. I remember I heard something about the first phone call of all time, apparently between, would it be Bell and the president? I don't know, whoever it was between. And some philosopher was informed that so-and-so had spoken to so-and-so across so-and-so distance.
Yeah.
And they said, I hope they had something important to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it goes to also Hess and Damien, which was his first kind of post-Jungian experience. He wrote that book, if you're familiar with it. But he talks about, I no longer seek in books and in stars or et cetera. I look to my blood now. And I think there comes a time where you have to leave everything behind and step into that oblivion, so to speak. Leave the congregation, and I'm sort of in there, and I've always been beckoned by it. And I think in there you get initiated somehow, and then it just, everything is poetry. So whether you're using emojis or you're using what I think you can imbue everything with that. Michael Meade told me, if you're familiar with him, a great mystic, kind of elder, true elder right now, one of the only voices I listen to currently about anything. But he said poetry is the natural speech of the human soul. So I do believe poetry defies definition. We all have our own relationship with that word. But yeah, I think for me, you have to really kind of go away into silence and then get, I don't know, something along those lines.
Yeah, well, I think writers are alone most of the day. I think you don't even have to cultivate. You're just going to be alone because that's where the work happens. And you only by assuming a literary posture are you going to be visited by anything, the gifts from language or the gifts from the soul, is if you're sitting there as a receiver.
Yeah.
And I think you've been receiving. That's what we do. We listen for the messages.
Growing up in New York City was an extreme example of being surrounded by a lot of people, and I felt more lonely than I ever have. So I think it's a funny idea there, like Kerouac's point, and you just mentioned like poets are lonely, but for me, being around people is lonely. And actually being a poet, when I'm communicating, my friends are Hess, my friends are Haruki, and walking my dog, I'll talk to Molly and she's depthy. She always says, once you go depth, you can never go back. I believe that. I mean, I don't know. So yes, I think loneliness or that kind of thing is required. And I think...
And I don't mean lonely in a sad way,
sure,
like you're some broken animal who no one wants to be around. It's just like when you're working, you're alone. And we're all going to die alone too, though we
definitely
don't want to think of it that way. So I think, there's something at stake in literature and in ambition and in the arts. And you just take your chances. And you give it your best shot when you can.
Have you heard of Keats's idea of negative capability?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's pretty interesting.
That's beautiful. I think it's kind of loosely defined as when in doubt, and you can't be certain of anything, don't need certainty.
Yeah.
So you tolerate this, I can't be sure, but I'm going to keep going.
And that's what artists are, he said. That's what their true skill is, in the ability to be more vulnerable and to hold the tension of mystery and discomfort. I thought that was kind of fascinating.
To die at 25, having written those batch of great odes when he was 21, 22, 23. It's a tender loss. And he felt it, he knew he was going because he got TB and couldn't survive.
Well, I think it's interesting that you send your books to people, and in the article that you sent me, Nadia, on you, Jeff, the writer, who is a admirer and really respects you, talks about in their experience that it seems like, you had that one selected, I think 33 something poems published by the Canadian imprint, but for the most part that you don't do that, although he says they say you could, for sure. And I really admire that. I remember the quote in the movie talking to that painter who does those really detailed abstracts, and the material he uses is it's a lot about the material he uses. He said to be an artist, you have to spend money to lose money. So these ideas of
James,
you're sending out these chapbooks, and I just would love to hear a little bit about your experience as an artist and the mantra. Part of the film's mantra that I took is put it out while you're alive, put it out.
Yeah.
And for me, it always has been a struggle. When I was signed young as a musician to a label, when all these different moments, when I've taken what feels like the inside jokes or the creativity that comes naturally, when I try to bottle it and then share it, something happens. And I've tried to examine that. I've tried to get over that. I've tried to not take myself seriously, but there is something about my relationship with creativity that kind of backfires on me when I try to make it work for me in certain ways.
Funny that you bring that up, because I started publishing other people's books, other people, and I got good at bookmaking. I worked at a place called the West Coast Print Center in California when it opened. We all learned to make good-looking books, and I was publishing the poets who's my peers, the people I liked, whose work I read, and that was a way of using the book as a way to get the info out. And later, after I quit the press, I realized I like making books. Why not just make my own? And I had the poems, and I began to do a lot of drawings. So putting poems and drawings together, I thought, in these little chapbooks, 150 copies, 100 copies, I knew how to do it. And not everybody, some people are perplexed by, how do you make a book? Well, you just fold a piece of paper together and there it is. But that's tough for certain people who haven't been through the little sequence and how to get things printed. So I like making books, but if I don't make a book, I don't finish the poems.
Yeah.
By putting them into circulation, I'm signing off on them, saying, hey, they're done. I don't want them anymore. You read them. And so that's true of the drawings too. So it's a way of staying visible out there and sharing whatever I've got, at no cost to you.
Yeah.
And I like sending things out for free. And that I consider it wampum. In many instances, I get stuff back. People, I send them a book, they send me their book. So it's this kind of staying outside of the commercial market where no one buys poetry anyway, or few do. And so it's just a way of constructing a life where I'm using myself and sharing it with whomever and getting things in exchange. And I like that wampum imagination, the term from the Indian culture.
I love that.
Or potlatch. A potlatch is another thing when they all got together and started giving each other stuff constantly.
Yeah.
And, an odd little potlatch.
So I was talking to Molly, and I'd love to hear from both of you today. Campbell talks about, for those of us who are living our soul's purpose or finding ourselves in this kind of mystic place, it is important you got to find a way to penetrate society, whether that's you become a professor, whether like a way to kind of still plug into the logical world. Molly is a therapist. She feels that perhaps that's one of the last dignified professions, and you just said people don't buy poetry. I am a poet, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm a mystery like all of us, but
You're a podcaster too.
Oh,
and
man.
That's a huge part of your existence.
I roll
in the
my
real
eyes
world.
at that. I roll my eyes at that, though. Podcasting is kind of like a cringy thing for me. Everything form-wise has become a bit cringy. Maybe I'm just a pretentious punk, but
But what bothers you about the podcasting? Because it gives you a chance to exhibit your knowledge and interests in things.
totally. No, it's the form is beautiful. I love connecting with you guys, people, like you. And I don't know. I think anything modern can just feel a little bit something like everyone who cares what you have to say, just contributing more noise to the white noise out there.
Yeah.
And the technological that's why I loved your film, the physicalness of the books. I crave that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this sets a new bar. In the interview I did recently and throughout my 100+ episodes, there's been some experiences where I'm like, this is what I want to do. So it's all good. And I love podcasting in this way.
You're really prepared. I mean, this is not something where you say, you start talking. You've got a lot on your plate there. And that's been very helpful for us to see who you are.
Thank you.
This is my first look at you, really. And This is you're in the ball game, dude.
This is the Huckleberry thing. I'm just trying to convince you guys to take on all my existential overflow, and paint the fence, so I don't have to deal with it. I can sit back.
Was it? Yeah, Huckleberry got Tom Sawyer to paint the damn fence.
Yeah, you guys are Tom Sawyer.
No, Tom Sawyer got.
Okay, you guys are Huckleberry.
Tom was the hustler.
Tom was the hustler. He got some nondescript kid.
Yeah.
So we were talking about that Campbell idea, needing to plug in, and there's the idea that I've been able to do this because of personal reasons, to be this kind of free in my creativity. And now being a father, I do a lot of that work, but it's still ambiguous. My experiment has not yielded a materialistic clarity that I've tried to find, whether it's the record labels and the da-da-da-da-da. So I was just curious what your thoughts on that for both of you, and maybe Nadia to kind of bring your energy here, that dance between the same question of being yourself while you're here and then finding ways to function. I know you're working in some new areas as far as an educator while balancing your fierce creativity. And then maybe for those of us where that doesn't even work sometimes and we're stuck in this kind of liminal space and just,
Yeah, I think that's another subject of that's another theme of the figures, the film, is just how can you be an artist and be true to your art and not have any illusions of making money as a poet, making money as a filmmaker. So how do you then balance that? How do you what do you do to make money where you're not going to be necessarily selling your soul?
Yeah.
And then be able to continue to do your work. And so, for me, making this film, that was a question, because that was a question that I was having when I started this film in my late 20s. And in making the film, I just sort of came to the realization that something that I would enjoy, where it would be like to hone a trade. Basically, you got to hone a trade and bring it to the marketplace and see where where you can be useful. And that has been in teaching. And I love the aspect of storytelling and all the games and all the songs, but children love to hear stories about yourself. So, I've been learning stories, like learning fairy tales by heart and telling those, and those are really fun. But also they love to hear stories about yourself. And so that's been another opportunity to kind of go through my own life and then be like, oh, that's a good story. Write it down and then practice with my son. So at nighttime, tell him the story, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then refine it and then bring it to class. And so it's a way to exist in the world and, you know, have some kind of subsistence that isn't it's definitely energy sucking, but I don't feel it's soul sucking.
No, I think it's great. I think teaching is beautiful. And I think this Steiner teaching is particularly tender because you have the soul of the child in mind. And if you don't, you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I think as we get older, I mean, all through, we're talking about wearing different hats. She's worn a number of different hats. I certainly haven't. As I've gone through my 1,000 years of living, you just have to adapt and adjust and take advantage of the way the gods offer you shots. And I think, so I think this idea of you being multiple person with different interests, that's the way it is now. You got to have different hats.
That's what I lost before in the witch suppression thought on my tangent was in those books, talk of young being artists, being scientists, have to choose, but I can't. The Red Book later only being released after he passed because perhaps it would be a stain on his doctor record or his, and that was part of the Sky Father abstraction, dominant, glaring, defining, to say that again, that where it's actually natural to be amorphous and changing and shape-shifting. It's more natural that way. I think for me, your father, in my brief understanding in the film and his correspondence with Henry Miller, it sounds like his letter writing, your dad's letter writing was his main outlet to a certain extent, and he was a great writer. But maybe he got bitten by the black hole a little bit that I've also experienced a lot that says, why bother? I mean, I don't want to classify that at all.
He did have that problem. I think he, for one reason or another that I'll never know why, he kind of elected not to push himself as a writer or a poet. He did a few things, and that was what he did. And then he kind of backed off. And that was his decision.
Of course. And I see you as the polar opposite in a lot of regards in that film. I said to you after I was walking out, I said, I love you, man. And I meant that because I don't know you, but I love your essence. I love how much you've brought it out, as I mentioned in the beginning. Have you, if you don't mind me asking, experienced that kind of gloom and doom? And to both of you, of course, even describing what your process is right now, Nadia, and I know you said it's energy draining, but for me, I really don't have a lot of energy these days to do. Like, that sounds exhausting. I don't think I could do that. Think about stories and write them down. So just wondering where you guys get this pep. Are you delusional? Are you on drugs? Are you just kidding? Obviously I'm kidding, but you're both such forces and seemingly navigating real shit. It's not like you're out here escaping the blades, but you're still.
Yeah, you're going to win a few and lose a few, and you're going to take a few hits. But I think most of the time we can get through. If you've got a reasonably strong, intact ego that isn't totally shattered by life, then you can keep on keeping on. And I think that those old lines, those old cliches help.
So they do help, actually. In the end, the cliches have their place.
They do,
yeah. Maybe not in poetry, but in keeping on. Yeah.
You get out of it what you put into it is my favorite line of all. My mother said that one to me. I came home from college and I'm sitting on I think in my sister's bedroom, because I don't know where she was. And my mother came in and sat down on the bed. And we were just talking about where my brothers were and how my old man's doing. And she said, well, Jeff, you get out of it what you put into it. I knew that as a platitude already, because it's part of the world we live in. But boy, did it make sense to me that that's all we get out of it is what we put into it. And the more you put into it, the more you get. And so I think it was a kind of a life lesson, like a little American Zen.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, American Zen. Yeah, I also feel that when I'm sort of when I'm not future tripping, but sort of working towards something, then there's a propulsion. So like I'm not constantly looking at what I've done.
Yeah.
And that's done. And so I'm kind of like always chasing the ball. And I love playing soccer with your son, and I love to chase a ball. So I think that there's a bit of that, working on the next thing and thinking about the next thing, and then enjoying moments of being completely present. But there isn't so much, like I feel like getting bogged in regret or thinking like about your past success or failure. Like that's
not you.
It's not me.
Yeah.
But and it, I don't know. It's definitely helped to keep going.
Yeah.
I think it helps to kick that ball around.
Yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
That ball's right out in front of you. And I think if you guys are playing soccer, whatever the metaphor is, you gotta, you be thankful there's a ball to kick.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And that there's someone maybe kicking it back to you.
That's right. Yeah.
Or you're just dribbling. But it's
We got to wrap this up because I got to go pick up my son, and we're going to hear Nas.
Oh, wow.
With the Boston Symphony Orchestra at Tanglewood tonight.
That's crazy.
He's got seats. You could go on the lawn. But anyway, can you dig this? Nas, who broke 10, 15, 20 years ago, one of the major rappers, is working with the Boston Symphony Orchestra.
That's beautiful.
It's going to be, I hope it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I'm from New York, so Nas was one of the the early inspirations for me, indeed. And that was one of the ideas, balancing the muse with parenting. But yeah, we can wrap it there, and maybe to be continued with a part 2. I had other thoughts on ping pong and.
Hey, are you a ping pong player?
I'm a pretty serious ping pong player. I was a champion at summer camp.
Oh, damn. Well, we will next time I'm out west, we play.
Yeah, I think I mean, we'll see what I can do. I won't get too cocky because you guys seem you and your son are pretty up there.
There may not even be a table.
So. Exactly. We don't need a table to play ping pong.
I'm getting a table.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no, and I had other thoughts on writing poems about toenail fungus and, things of phantom wombs, that men have phantom wombs, real men fail, weeding bookshelves. And perhaps, the last thing at some point, without wanting to challenge at all, but Molly, or to bring discomfort or anything, but I was fascinated how Molly, post the film, said that moment where your ex-wife is talking about how you fed everyone at the party before her.
Yeah.
And Molly saw that in me too, which hurt a bit to hear that. And I was just curious, not to answer now, but leaving that out there as like this overflow of giving books. And I have the same way, wanting to kind of please a lot of people, but then in the close intimacy, it can be different perhaps sometimes. So
I think that's well said. Some days better than others. Sometimes the cake goes into the right mouth.
Yeah. But it's always on our face, regardless of what we do. It's always splattered on our own faces. And if this was our first preliminary interview, to go on that and leave us with that, there's a joke I heard from a trainer at the gym who says during an interview, the interviewer says to the interviewee, "What do you consider to be your greatest weakness?" He says, "Honesty." The interviewer says, "I actually don't consider honesty to be a weakness." And he says, "I don't give a fuck what you think." So next episode, maybe we won't give a fuck what we think, and we can
That's
go from
great.
there.
Yeah. Take a few chances.
Exactly.
Nice meeting you.
Much love, y'all, for real. Thank you so much.
Babe, this pain ain't eloquent. They threw my dreams in a cage. Asylum songs I howl. The only constants change. Get this skin off my skeleton. I'm so tired of this brain. I take aim to shoot the moon, but it backfired and I'm back here looking helpless in my astronaut gear, holding on to nothing, just some child's dream. I'm no pioneer. Where are you? You cruel joke. I trusted you and you broke my heart. It's not in the money, not in a woman, not in an idea. Where are you? You keep calling. It's not in the money, not in a woman, not in an idea. Where are you? You keep calling. An empty gave me the medicine to douse my madhouse of flames. My friends told me to chill, have a drink, take a pill. Suicide is irrelevant in this endless haunted maze. I take aim to shoot the moon, but it backfired and I'm back here looking helpless in my astronaut gear, holding on to nothing, just some childish dream, no pioneer. Where are you, you cruel joke? I trusted you and you broke my heart. It's not in the mind.